Okay, let's see what's going on with this microphone. Okay. Everybody, if you can hear me, just put a 1 in the chat. All right. Okay, before I get into tonight's topic, I am going to do a bit of trumpery, and I'm going to give everybody a progress report on the SJS Direct 2024 catalog, which is going to start on March 22nd with John Haynes' Illuminati. Now, John Haynes' Illuminati is uploaded to KDP as related to paperbacks, and it's also loaded up on all of the digital platform services like Kindle, Google Play, Smashwords, and the iBookstore. So if you want the ebook version, you can pre-order that right now on Amazon.com and other online booksellers. And you can, if you want to get a paperback copy, it'll be available on March 22nd. So the 2024 catalog kicks off with John Haynes' Illuminati, where Mike Williams has done a fantastic job paying homage to Action Jackson, the 1988 movie poster. And this cover pays homage to that classic Carl Weathers and Vanity movie. So this is the book that kicks off the SJS Direct 2024 catalog. And I'm hoping you'll be there for John Haynes' Illuminati in March. And in April, we have a big event with Isis Dark Incubus. And I've got the cover for that. I showed it last week. Bill Walko did a fantastic job, and Romesh did a fantastic job with the colors. So the only book I'm currently waiting for Bill to get back to me on is Esteemed Horror in the Hamptons. And once I get that cover, the 2024 catalog will be complete on my end. And Lawrence Cherry, he wants to bring in a book for the 2024 catalog. So we're going to have 4, maybe possibly 5 books for the entire 2024 catalog of SJS Direct books. And I'm hoping to get all of those books out on time for this year. Now, in addition to those books, I'm still working on other comics in addition to John Haynes at Death's Door, the successful 2022 Kickstarter comic. And I'm trying to work together to get the budget ready to do a full feature comic with The Goddess Next Door. So that's my next project that I would like to get out next. I've raised about a quarter of the funds to get that comic produced, and I'm hoping I can get that comic done sooner rather than later. Now, a third project I'm currently working on is a light novel. Now, light novels are a companion to manga, and a light novel is a book that is a novel that features art inside of it. So I'm hoping to do a light novel project, and that's what I'm currently working on right now. Now, I'm finished doing the outline for that book, which is going to be Spinsterella, Goth Girl Summer. And that book is one that I'm currently starting to put work in on, and I hope to have a video following up on it. Now, I hope to do some videos next week as related to the Vince McMahon situation, as related to the scandal going on around him, in addition to the Hugh Hefner scandal that Jude2786 talked with me about in Thursday's live stream that I did with him as a guest. So those are 2 videos I would like to do, in addition to the video about the black female who came to the date looking bad. So that's what I'm currently working on, and that's what you guys can look forward to as related to future videos, and also as related to SJS Direct book projects. Now, with all of that said, I'm going to get into tonight's topic, and tonight's topic is me asking a critical question regarding America's economy. Is America currently in a recession? Now, the cream of wheat man, New York Mayor Eric Adams, a long time ago, said that New York City is in a recession. And that's the only thing that I could agree with him on, but I came up with that observation way before he even made a statement on it. Now, when I take a look at America's economy, America's economy isn't looking as great as it did back in the early days of the Biden presidency. Now, when Joe Biden was inaugurated in 2021, I have to wonder where he was on the state of the economy, because he was sitting there saying that the economy was doing well and the economy was in good shape. But in 2024, the economy is clearly not doing as well as it did in 2021. Because when I look at the economic indicators of America, I don't really see the economy doing as strongly as it did during the Trump presidency, transitioning into the first year of the Biden presidency. Because when I look at the economic indicators, they don't show me an economy that is strong. No, I'm seeing an economy that is struggling overall. And I see an economy that has been struggling overall since about late 2023, because not 2023, but 2022. In 2022, late 2022, I started to see major economic issues, because as a YouTuber, that's when I started to see my AdSense dollars start to go into a state of decline. Moreover, I started to see my book sales start to go in a state of decline. And that really showed me that many Americans really don't have that disposable income like they used to, because when people had money, they would go out here and be spending money on books on the regular, and I would see a lot more money coming in from AdSense as related to revenue coming in on views. So those were two indicators telling me that the economy was not performing as strongly as it did back in the days of the Trump presidency and the early days of the Biden presidency. Now, all of that time was basically part of the pandemic, where the entire economy got an artificial boost from economic stimuluses from the COVID pandemic and money brought into the economy from the American Rescue Plan. And after that money came in and out of the economy, what I started to see around late 2022 as inflation was going on was not only the price of things going up, but the value of the dollar starting to go down. And what happened to the American economy was very similar to what happened during the 1970s in the days of Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, because in the days of Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, we went through this cycle of inflation. And as we went through this cycle of inflation, what the government did was continue to pour lots of money into the economy. And as they poured money into the economy, this decreased the value of the dollars. And as it decreased the value of the dollars, people's wages went up, prices went up, but the value of the money went down. And people felt like they could not live day to day, because every other day prices were going up, but people's money had less and less value. And that same dysfunctional economic cycle seems to have started once again here in America, starting in around about 2021, where Joe Biden decided to give a lot of Americans that stimulus as a part of his American Rescue Plan. And it looks like to me possibly that the American Rescue Plan basically didn't rescue Americans. No, what it did was start the American economy that was already red hot to start cooling down. And instead of the economy starting to do well, the economy started to go into a state of decline. And it went into a state of decline all because Joe Biden basically went and poured more money into an already hot economy. He and the Congress went out here and legislated putting more money into the economy, and this basically put more money into the economy than it could basically handle. And once they poured all of these dollars into the economy, what this did was make the value of a US dollar drop in value. And once that dollar started to drop in value, this is what started the cycle of inflation that led to prices going up. And as prices started to go up, this is where people started to realize that their money had less spending power than it originally did. Now, the Biden administration's American American Rescue Plan was not only one of the problems, it was another problem with many states going out and raising their minimum wages, because as they raised their minimum wages, this also had an impact on prices. And as we raised the minimum wage from 10 or $7 or $8 an hour to $15 to $20 an hour, what this did was further decrease the value of the dollar, and even worse, decrease the number of hours that individuals could work on the job. Because when you have companies that are told they have to pay higher minimum wages, this means that they have to hire fewer workers, and they have to fire fewer workers because this is the only way they can mitigate the fixed cost as related to their business. So we had a lot of things that compounded on the economy as related to the overall long term. But many of these blue party politicians, all they were thinking about were their short-term victories and not the long-term damage they were doing to the overall economy. Now, as time went on and they were celebrating their American Rescue Plan and their raising the minimum wage, they didn't see how the value of America's dollars was losing value, and as time was going on. And as time was going on, we were seeing what was happening was prices continued to go up, people's job hours were continuing to get cut, and this was all showing me indicators of an economy that really wasn't growing, but an economy that was starting to contract. Because in the economic cycle, there is a time when an economy does contract, and when an economy contracts, what happens is you have situations where companies are not making the money like they used to, and then they have to start cutting back on expenses. And we started to see that happen over the last 2 years, around December of 2022 and 2023, which was one of the worst years economically for big business and Hollywood. 2023 was one of the absolute worst years for Hollywood, where almost 90% of the movies were box office failures, and with 90% of their movies bombing at the box office, Hollywood has been hemorrhaging money for the last year. So that's not a sign of a strong economy when you have big business having to continuously raise prices and big business institutions like Hollywood losing money on practically almost every movie except possibly Super Mario, Barbie, Oppenheimer, and The Sound of Freedom. When you have 4 movies out of an entire slate failing at the box office, and studios like Disney losing over $1 billion in a calendar year, that's not a sign of economic prosperity. No, it's a sign that the country is in an economic decline, and it's a sign that the American economy is not in a very good place. Now, you'll have people saying, oh, the economy is doing well, and I would say those people are in a state of denial. And I say that they're in a state of denial because every economic indicator I have seen over the last 30 years, when there was a time of prosperity, was completely different than it is now. In the times of prosperity in the 1990s, when we had the dot-com craze from 1998 to 2001. That was a big economic boom. And during that economic boom, we saw companies expanding and companies hiring. I mean, you have never seen an economic boom time where you saw companies taking losses, and you never saw an economic boom time when you saw companies doing things like laying off workers. I mean, over the last year or so, we have seen major corporations like Disney, Time Warner, and many other companies like Google talk about laying off workers. And when is the last time you've seen during a prosperous economy companies talking about laying off workers? Critical question I need to ask most Americans about America's economy. I mean, when is the last time you've seen an economy that was doing well where you saw people being laid off? Because again, if we look at the peak period of America's economy in the 90s, there was basically jobs everywhere and people could easily find a job. But when you look at Joe Biden's economy and its so-called prosperity, you don't really see a lot of jobs these days. No, all you hear are announcements of layoffs. And again, layoffs are not a sign that an economy is expanding. No, it's a sign that an economy is contracting. And when you have an economy that has lots of layoffs and companies taking losses and even businesses going out of business, that is a sign that the economy is not doing well. And it's a sign that the economy is in a very bad place. But the sad part is that with many of these people who are a part of the Blue Party, they don't want to talk about this recession, and they don't want to talk about this recession because if they talk about this recession in an election year, then it basically guarantees that Joe Biden and the Blue Party would lose this election, because this whole situation with the economy is very similar again to what happened to Jimmy Carter back in 1976 when he saw a recession coming and made a lot of promises that he would make the country better. And sadly, he could not meet those goals. And as a result, this led to the election of Ronald Reagan. And Joe Biden and the Blue Party are in a more desperate position than Jimmy Carter was in 1976. No, Joe Biden is in a worse place because he promised, like George H.W. Bush, to go out here and improve on things, because in 1988, George H.W. Bush said that Americans would be better off than they were 4 years later. And in 1992, what happened was America was in the middle of an economic recession and they were worse off. And that basically put the nail in the coffin for George H.W. Bush when he ran against Bill Clinton. And just like George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter, Joe Biden promised to build back better. But 4 years later, nothing is built, nothing is back, and nothing is better for American citizens who have seen the quality of their lives go into a state of decline. And as Americans have seen their spending power drop, seen prices increase, and in some cases see themselves losing their jobs, they're seeing that the Biden administration has not built anything back better for most Americans in a tangible way. And as they sit there struggling on and wondering how they're going to make ends meet, what has happened is most Americans are sitting there watching as the government goes out here and spends money to fight a war in Ukraine. And they watch as millions of migrants come across the border and get all sorts of free services in all of these sanctuary cities. And that is the thing that has frustrated many Americans who have seen their ability to live day to day go into a worse state than it was during the days of the pandemic. I mean, in the pandemic, Americans did get $3,000 from the overall pandemic funds approved by the Trump administration, and then another $1,200 from the American American Rescue Plan. And in the aftermath of that, many Americans are now living paycheck to paycheck once more. And as they've been living paycheck to paycheck once more, this is where they're starting to become frustrated with all of these blue party politicians because, again, nothing has been built, nothing is back, nothing is better. And this is the main reason why most Americans are just sitting there frustrated because Joe Biden's whole campaign has not delivered on a promise to most Americans who are seeing that they're not living in an economic situation where they're doing well. And most people now are thinking back to the days of the Trump presidency and realizing that from 2017 to 2020, yes, people told us Donald Trump would be the great Satan, but the American economy was doing far better under Donald Trump, an inexperienced man as related to politics, than Joe Biden, who has over 50 years of experience in Washington. And the only thing Joe Biden has done basically is lead the country into an economic ditch where he has become completely tone deaf to most Americans who, again, have been living paycheck to paycheck after the pandemic and are barely keeping their heads above water, dealing with these increases in prices from everything from a simple pack of cookies all the way up to electric bills and other bills like gasoline. I mean, prices are through the roof, and most Americans are sitting there saying, well, how are things better under Joe Biden? Because all they are getting is higher prices every day. And those higher prices are an indicator to an economy that's not doing very well and an economy that is basically looking like it's more and more broken. And more, when we really look at it, it was the Biden presidency that wound up breaking the economy. But nobody has really brought up these talking points because most in the mainstream media already know that Joe Biden is in a fragile place. And because they know that Joe Biden is in a fragile place, they don't want to bring these subjects up because they fear that if these subjects are brought up, this would possibly cost him the election. Because over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, Joe Biden's approval rating has gone from being in the mid 40s to now being under the low 30s. And with people having struggles in their lives, his approval rating is getting near the point where Eric Adams currently is at 28%. And many of these people who are a part of corporate America and the mainstream media are scared to talk about the economy because if they talk about the economy, they know that this would be the kiss of death for Joe Biden. They know that this economy, in the fragile state that it's in, if you start talking about all of the losses the economy has taken over the last 1.5 years, you're going to have Joe Biden's whole presidency being held accountable for it. Moreover, you're going to have many members of the Blue Party also being held accountable for their state and local and congressional failures. So they don't want to talk about America's economy, and they don't want to use the R word to talk about America's economy. That's why you see the guys at CNN, MSNBC, and many of these other media platforms like ABC, CBS, and NBC not talking about the economy, because if they talk about the economy, it would be the nail in the coffin for Joe Biden. And that's why nobody's talking about the economy and the sad state of affairs of the economy that it's in. because the U.S. economy, when you really look at the U.S. economy, it's in a really bad place because when you have an economy where a Little Debbie cake back in 2020 was costing 50 cents, then it goes to 75 cents and is now at $1. And you have candy bars that were originally $1, now we're going up to $1.50. We clearly have inflation that continues to get worse, and it's showing that the value of the dollar continues to drop as the government continues to print money, not understanding that if you keep printing money, you're going to lower the value of those dollars. And as money has been printed for the American screw job, American Rescue Plan, and money to pay to try to take care of all of these migrants, and money spent to the Ukraine and sent to other countries, the value of the American dollar continues to drop, but nobody wants to talk about that whole situation. No, what they want to do is keep deflecting by saying we can't elect Donald Trump. But when we look at Joe Biden's record, we clearly see that he's basically taken the country from being in a place of economic prosperity into a recession. And we are in a recession, because a recession is several quarters of economic decline. And that's what we had starting in the fourth quarter of 2022 and the all 4 quarters of 2023. It cannot be argued that we had 4 quarters of decline because we had 4 quarters of companies taking straight losses, and we had several sectors of the economy take straight losses. We had companies taking huge losses over the whole course of 2023. We had almost all the movie studios taking major losses as related to their movies. We had retail taking major losses over the holiday season, and we had the toy industry taking huge losses. I had heard about Hasbro. They were laying off workers because they said they had a terrible holiday season. This was right before Christmas. We had Hasbro saying they were taking major losses, and this was shown to me by what was happening on Hasbro's own website as related to sales. I would go to Hasbro's website as related to sales, and I would just see the entire website basically having dozens of figures on clearance. And these were figures that were announced throughout the year. And what they're doing now is trying to spin narratives as related to Hasbro to try to make it look like, oh, there is no recession as related to the economy overall. And what they want to do now is create narratives to try to make it look like there is no real problem. But if you look at this section of Hasbro Pulse's website, they have an outlet section. This is the kind of language they use to try to cover up the losses. And they say that they're having this outlet, and the outlet is a way for them to give you figures at bargain prices. But in actuality, these were figures that could not sell well and over the last year, and now they're cutting prices on them. So as we take a look at this picture, fair use of Hasbro's website, we see a lot of figures, even exclusives like this Killmonger. This guy was an Amazon exclusive that was being sold for $27.99, and now he's being sold at a discount price along with other merchandise. And this was never done in the whole 10 or 15 years I have been collecting. This Ronan here was an Amazon exclusive for $40, and now he's $25. Again, in my over 35 years of toy collecting, I have never seen Hasbro have an outlet for their toys. No, when I'm out here collecting, they used to put up pre-orders for these kinds of figures. And usually what would happen when they would put up the pre-order for these figures is all of these figures would completely sell out. That's what would happen over at the Hasbro website back in the day. Again, what they would do is put up these figures, and these figures that are in this outlet section, most of these figures, they would have sold out. But many of these figures are now still sitting up on their website, and they're sitting on their website in this whole clearance section they call the outlet, and they're sitting there, even these retail exclusives, for discount prices because Hasbro has basically saturated the toy market, and many collectors who used to have money for toys no longer have that money for toys. And because they don't have that money for toys, what's happening is a lot of merchandise is piling up at Hasbro Pulse's website on clearance, and it's also piling up at places like Ollie's, the discount outlet, where they have basically, even after Christmas, are still sitting on merchandise. You can go to the World Class BSers website to check that out. And that is an indicator to me that the economy is in a really bad place, because when people had money and disposable income, they would go out and they would be at that website on the day these figures were announced, and they would be buying these figures and putting in pre-orders to the point where these figures would be selling out. But when there's inflation and people's money has less value, what people do is they start focusing on their basic needs, and they focus on their basic needs, such as making sure they can be able to buy their groceries, be able to get their clothes clean. I mean, that's what happens because people's money is tight, and people's money has become a lot tighter over the last year and a half. And that's what I've seen myself as related to book sales, because over the last year and a half, as related to book sales, I have seen my own book sales go into a state of decline. And I've seen people who at one time, when it was Christmas time, over the last two Christmases, what people would do is get their gift cards, and they would take their gift cards and go out and pick up books on the SJS Direct imprint as gifts for their friends and family, or they would try out certain titles with ebook format. But over the last year and a half, I'm seeing people, when they get their gift cards, they're not seeing that money as disposable money. No, what they're doing right now is seeing that money as essential and taking that money to go buy their groceries over at Walmart, over at Target, and at the supermarket. Because when you get that gift card money, you don't see it as money to just throw away or take a risk on something new and different or exciting. No, people are using that money to try to make ends meet. And that's the kind of behavior people participate in during an economic downturn like a recession, because they're living paycheck to paycheck. And because the price of things go up, they got to make sure that that money stretches out over an extended period of time. That's what I've been seeing now as related to the economic indicators of America's economy, an economy that people in the Blue Party will sit there and tell you is doing well. But when I look at the economy and I see the prices at the supermarket, when I see pizzas that used to cost just, again, $4.99 on sale, now at $5 to $6.99 as a sale price, and when I see the price of things like orange juice going up, and the price of bacon going up, and eggs. I mean, eggs now here in New York are $3.50 for a dozen of jumbo eggs at one market in my neighborhood, $3.99 at another. I mean, at one time, these eggs were down to 2 for $4, but now they're back up to 2 for $7. And again, when your money is tight, you're going to start thinking about how you spend that money. And that's what I see a lot of Americans doing right now. They're really thinking about how they spend their money, and they're thinking about where they're spending their money. I mean, they're really thinking twice about how they're spending their money. And they're thinking about that because money don't go as far as it did during the days of Obama or the days of Donald Trump. No, in the days of Joe Biden, the money don't go that far, but we're told the economy is doing well. And I have to wonder, where is people in the Biden administration as related to money? I mean, are you living in the same world that we are? And it shows me that there is a very strong disconnect between the Biden presidency and we, the people, because anybody who is out here knows that the economy is in this state of where it would be in a recession. And in a recession, you would see indicators like this, where you would see prices going up. You would see companies closing up stores, like I saw with Macy's, which recently announced they had a bad a year as related to retail, and that they're going to lay off workers and close stores. I mean, that doesn't go on in an economy where it's a boom period. No, in a boom period, you would be hearing that Macy's would be opening up stores, buying new locations and building new locations and hiring new people. No, you wouldn't. You would hear them talking about expanding their business, but instead, what we're hearing is, oh, there's layoffs. And again, layoffs happen during a recession. That's where we see businesses taking people's jobs away, because that's how they save money. And we also see businesses and industries going out and contracting overall. And that's what we're seeing with big tech, with companies like Google, which have laid off and possibly project to lay off 30,000 workers as they look to implement AI. We're seeing them looking to lay off workers, and that doesn't happen in an economy that's expanding. No, that happens in an economy that's contracting. And that's why I have to wonder if America is in a recession, and is the mainstream media suppressing that information? That's what I'm wondering right now, because we clearly have an economy that's not doing well as it should be, but we have a mainstream media that isn't talking about that economy at all. No, what we have is an economy that nobody wants to talk about, because they fear that if they talk about that economy, it could cause people to panic. And if people start to panic, they fear that Joe Biden would definitely lose the election. They know that they're on already thin ice with the American public overall, because Joe Biden has basically gone out here and alienated a large voting blocks. He's already alienated the black voting bloc as far back as December of 2020. And they have alienated black voters by saying, oh, you could do nothing for black people. But they clearly haven't done anything for Americans as related to the economy, because it's clear that your Build Back Better plan didn't build anything back better for Americans. No, you didn't do anything for Americans, and you've already alienated black voters, which was the biggest voting bloc that took their booties to the poll in 2020. And you've alienated all of those young black voters, those black men, and even the black women. So that voting bloc is gone. The Hispanic voting bloc is gone, because they're already alienated because of all the migrants getting services over Hispanic American citizens. And many of those Arabs, they're basically not interested in voting at all. And those white women were already with Trump. So Joe Biden knows he's in a bad place. And if you start talking about the dire state of the economy, that's where he knows he's basically on the road to headed that Jimmy Carter and George H.W. Bush were on. Because both of those incumbents, they basically wound up losing the election because they made big promises but couldn't deliver, one. And two, they appeared to be disconnected and tone deaf from the people who they said they wanted to serve. And instead of looking to serve we, the people, both of these presidents basically looked to start serving themselves, especially George H.W. Bush. And what happened was their entire chance for re-election went from being promising to winding up being slim to none, because they didn't deliver on the goods that they said they promised to deliver. So that's where Joe Biden is right now. And as they try to push narratives on mainstream media, trying to talk about Donald Trump, they can't talk about any of their accomplishments, because they really haven't accomplished anything. and they basically have nothing to really run on. And if you start talking about the economy, that's where their whole platform just completely falls apart. And they just better be happy that Donald Trump doesn't know how to debate on the economy, because he could basically use that as a punching bag on Joe Biden, because the whole state of the economy is so bad that you can just look at it and see that it's not really working. I mean, Joe Biden goes on Twitter and says, "Oh, there are all of these jobs out here," but when people go to places like Indeed and try to apply for any of these jobs, they see that there's next to nothing there, and they also see that all of the jobs that are there are just basically like the days of a recession, where they are out here and they're not really able to meet the more and more unrealistic criteria, because employers are starting to get picky. And they also see that when they go out here and look for a job, they don't really see the pay being very well, because the leftists raised the minimum wage. And as they've raised the minimum wage, we see that many of these jobs, while they're out here, they really don't pay much when you consider the value of those dollars. Yes, you've got jobs that pay $17 to $19 an hour as related to entry-level jobs here in New York. But when you look at the cost of living here in New York, that $17 to $19 an hour really don't go far, because the companies have cut the hours all the way down to about maybe 6 to 8 hours a day. And if you're lucky, you might get 12 to 14 hours a day for some of these jobs, because the company wants to cut costs as related to making workers part-time, so that they don't have to work them full-time. Because if a worker works full-time, what happens is they have to pay unemployment, they have to pay for health insurance, they have to pay for benefits, because they're mandated by the American health care plan that Barack Obama established. So Americans, it's hard when you find work. It's hard to get work that's full time anymore, and it's hard to stay on these jobs for extended periods of time. Keating Rourke, I have applied for jobs in New York for part-time jobs, full-time jobs. I mean, I've been applying for 15 years straight, and people just don't call back. That's always been the problem with me. I'll put the application in, but people just won't call back. And that's a big problem that many people are dealing with, because many of these employers are starting to become picky. In the 2021, with the return of the economy, yes, there were people who were a bit desperate, but now they're going back to being picky once again. And that's what's happening right now, because in an economy that's doing well, an employee can easily just go out here, put in an application, and start getting calls back. But I'm not seeing those calls coming back. And that's what's happening right now. I mean, a lot of people, they want to work, but the whole thing is you have a lot of these companies that they're just not putting up any really real listings, because I see the same listings over and over again. And that's another indicator of a recession. You don't really see a lot of employers really putting out real serious job listings and really putting information out there that people can use. So that's a problem I'm seeing. And again, that happens during recession. I remember in the recession of 2008, I started to see the same pattern when I started looking for civil service jobs, and I was starting to look for full-time work. After I lost my job in 2008, I started to see that same pattern. And that's another indicator of a recession, when people have to keep looking for work and they really can't find work. But Joe Biden will tell you the economy is doing well. And again, that's clearly a state of denial by the Blue Party and the Biden presidency, and shows us how they're living in their rose-colored reality politically. And that's a very bad place, because when you look at America, America isn't doing as well as everybody wants to say that it is. I mean, what I see here is a country that is in a major state of denial. And when you have people at the top who are in denial about the state of the union, it's a really bad problem, because you're not living in reality. And I would dare to say many haven't been living in reality since the aftermath of the pandemic because they just are in their own world. That was shown to me with all of these jab mandates that were unconstitutional being pushed by the Biden presidency and people like Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams. I mean, they're not living in the real world. No, they're living in a world where they don't see people. All they see is what their ideals and don't see reality. And that is also shown to me by these corporate bosses in Hollywood and corporate America who continue to push their far left social justice campaigns of these so-called diversity and inclusion. And we don't really see them focusing on anything of substance of getting people who are qualified, because when I look at these companies, they are just so detached. They're not looking to hire people. Some of them are thinking, oh, we can use AI to replace people, not understanding that if you cut these jobs, you are going to cut out people from being taxpayers. And if you don't have taxpayers, you don't have a revenue stream for people to have money to be able to do things like, oh, go shopping, able to go out here and pay their rent. And that means people are not going to be able to get rich, because if the working man don't have money, that means you won't have money either. Yeah, in the short term, you save money with the AI, but you've impoverished yourself because computers don't spend money. Computer programs do not spend money. And that's the thing that flies over the head of these big tech nerds. They sit there and think about the short term, which is, oh, we saved money with AI, but they're not thinking about the long term, which is people when they have money, they spend money, and that's how they contribute to an economy. And if there are no people to spend money, nobody's gonna be there to buy your shit. That's what they don't really understand. And that's going to exacerbate a recession and its recovery, because you can't recover if you can't hire workers. You can't rebuild an economy if your workers are replaced with computers. Now, these same people will sit there and say, oh, we can use universal basic income to help people. But the whole thing is universal basic income is based on tax revenue. And if people aren't working to pay taxes, then there's no source for the universal basic income. Again, no critical thinking. And that's one of the problems here with all of Joe Biden's economic leaders like Janet Yellen, who basically doesn't understand basic economics, because anybody would have told her not to keep raising the interest rates, because that was one of the things that is choking the life out of the economy. Next to them pouring so much money into the economy, they're not really seeing the big picture of the economy, and they're not seeing the big picture. And that's what we had, where the big problem is with this entire situation, because anybody who sees the big picture about America's economy clearly sees that America's economy is not performing as well as it did back in 2016 to about 2021. I mean, from that period, the economy was doing well, and I would say it was doing well until the American American Rescue Plan was put into place. And instead of rescuing Americans, it's just become one big screw job. And it's one big screw job because this made it where a lot of Americans who were a part of the gig economy wound up getting their money tied up because of that $600 threshold that basically made it where a lot of Americans would have to deal with a paper tsunami of 1099-Ks. And even the tax organization, the IRS, sees that whole plan as a complete failure, because all of those 1099-Ks, processing all of that information, would cost more than the original system, which was $20,000 or 200 transactions, because to try to process all that paperwork, that would basically overwhelm the IRS. And that's why they've had to delay it 2 times. And they basically are looking for Congress to repeal this policy. So we clearly see that America's economy basically is in the wrong hands. And those hands have taken us into a recession. But the whole thing is nobody wants to admit it, because what they're wanting to do is try to gaslight people into believing the economy is doing well. And they want to gaslight people into thinking the economy is perfectly fine. But it's clear to me that America's economy is not doing well because I'm looking at the economic indicators. I mean, I remember in 2007, I could see the recession coming. I was out with a family member at Christmas of about 2007 or 2008, and it was 2007, and I could see that the recession was coming because I was in Brooks Brothers on Madison Avenue, and I wasn't seeing the crowd coming in like it used to. So I was looking at it as like, yeah, we're in the middle of a recession here. And I saw that coming because of the subprime mortgage mess, because a lot of people were taking out these mortgages and they clearly had no money. And the entire economy was based on a lot of gimmicks and hot air and accounting tricks. And eventually the economy could not hold itself up on these gimmicks and accounting tricks. And that's what led to the subprime mortgage crash and the Great Recession of 2008. I could see it back again in Christmas of 2007, and I could see it right now. I saw it back in 2022 in the fourth quarter. That's where I started to see the whole start of that recession. And that recession, again, I see started all because of Joe Biden and his attempts to overcompensate to try to spite Donald Trump with the American Rescue Plan. And that's where I see the start of the economy going into decline, because that's where we started to see the inflation. That's where we started to see the prices going up because of all of that money poured into the economy. And we started to see a lot of businesses really start to have problems, even though they were starting to hire back workers from the pandemic. We started to see problems because a lot of these companies really were not in a good place because they didn't have strong management or strong leadership. No, what we had were social justice warriors in entertainment, these activists in entertainment, spending hundreds and billions of dollars at places like Disney Plus and places like HBO Max on content that really wasn't of quality. I mean, I think about $225 million for a She-Hulk show with terrible writing. And this is the kind of stuff that made major losses for businesses like Disney, in addition to the movies at Pixar. And with all of those losses, people wanted to try to spin it and say, oh, this was just a local isolated incident to one company that's related to them making content that customers don't like. But I see it overall in a big picture. And when you have multiple companies taking multiple losses, that just creates an economic cycle of a recession. And when you see multiple industries with them taking losses, that's not an economy that's strong. No, that's an economy that is in a decline. And it's in a decline because we have people in charge who don't want to acknowledge the problem with America's economy. And that's going to exacerbate the problem of America's economy, not having the leadership that can acknowledge that the country is economically in a bad place. I mean, when you have people saying things are going good, when the average everyday American is fearing that they won't have enough money to pay their rent, won't have enough money to pay for their groceries, won't be able to go out and take care of basic needs like food. And we have movie studios sitting there saying, oh, we want to charge you $20 for a movie ticket, when the average American is just barely got enough money for groceries. That shows me there's a disconnect between business and the people, and the businesses aren't serving the people. No, they're too caught up in themselves and caught up in their ideals to see the needs of real people. And that's the big problem with this Biden presidency. We have a nation that doesn't see its people. No, all it sees is itself. And like Val is talking about, especially with this housing shortage, which is created by these corporations buying up property, keeping generations of people from being able to buy their own homes. That's what we're seeing right now. They're creating an artificial bubble because they want to buy up the home to drive up the value. And the whole thing is it's going to blow up in their face because the migrants aren't going to have $1 million for a house. The average working man doesn't have $1 million for a house. And people just don't have that kind of money anymore. No, people are living day to day and they don't have that money like that. So you have all these guys in corporate America and in Washington living in their own world, living in a fantasy. And that's the kind of disconnect that creates people to start getting frustrated to the point where they look to people like Donald Trump as the person with solutions, because the people on the other side of the political aisle really are just, they have their head stuck up their ass. And because they have their head stuck up their ass, they can't see any of the struggles everybody's going through. And the struggles that Americans are going through with this economy is they clearly are in the middle of a recession. And that recession is one that people are looking at and saying, hey, we had Joe Biden, we elected him. He said he was going to make things better, but things have clearly gotten worse. And since they've gotten worse, we have to look at this man and really look at him as the one who basically created this mess, because nothing is built, nothing is back, nothing is better. And most Americans, they're just sitting there thinking about the whole state of their union, and their state of their union is worse than it was then when Joe Biden took office. And that's the thing that your guys at CNN and MSNBC don't want to talk about. That's the things that even some of these networks like Fox News don't want to talk about, because they know if people saw the truth about America's economy, it would be a completely different political result than they want. They wouldn't be able to try to push a candidate on people, because they would look to vote for the candidate to create a plan that's going to get them out of this entire economic mess that has been created by things like what some call get woke, go broke. And it's clear to me that part of it is not only electing new politicians. What we need are new business owners. We need new executives with vision and direction for these companies, because it's clear that the current crop of executives, guys like David Zaslav, guys like Bob Iger, they don't know what they're doing. And their whole thing is, oh, we'll lay people off. No, you shouldn't have hired those people in the first place. And those people that you've hired are so incompetent, they're running companies straight into the ground. And as they run these companies straight into the ground, what they're doing is making these companies to the point where they're on the brink of bankruptcy, and they're at the brink of bankruptcy because of the incompetence around. So that's what's happening here with the economy right now. Nobody's really listening to people, and nobody's really listening to the people because they're in their own world. That's what I see right now with America, because nobody wants to use the R word on the news. No, they'll just sit there and say everything is good when things clearly aren't good. No, all you have to do is go to a supermarket, go to a grocery store. I mean, I went to the grocery store today, and it was a shocker why potato chips were $2.25 when they were $2 all last year. And I've gone there and I've seen things like sodas that were $1.75 be $2. I mean, prices continue to go up. And I remember one guy say he had to spend $16 on an extra value meal. I mean, everyday stuff people are buying is costing more, and it's costing more because the value of the dollar has dropped. Tavania, Joseph, glad to see you here. You asked, would I recommend anybody currently move to New York? No, I would not recommend you come to New York. New York is basically as bad as it was in the 80s, and it's really bad here. The prices are high, the taxes are high. The cream of wheat man is in charge, and he just keeps making the city's quality of life go bad because of all the migrants there. I mean, he's brought all these migrants, and Midtown Manhattan is a complete Hades. So I wouldn't recommend you come to New York at all. And yeah, the like Midoriya says, yeah, the inflation is just the Blue Party made that mess. So it's a major mess over here in New York, and it's crazy, and I would never recommend you come here. Yeah, Valor, of Snicker bar is $1.50 now here in New York. I mean, it's really expensive, and the prices really here are crazy. I mean, I even went to McDonald's about a couple weeks ago, and yeah, it's about $15, $16 for a basic meal. I mean, these prices are no joke these days, but you've got politicians sitting there saying everything is great. And again, you're in denial if you say this, because the reality for the average everyday American, we can see how things are bad. We can see how the economy is not going strong, because again, how many strong economies have layoffs? That's a critical question I want to ask people. I mean, how many economies that do well have whole industries laying off people in large numbers? No, you only see layoffs in recessions. And that's what I saw in 1991. That's what I saw in 2001 after 9/11. That's what I saw in 2008 after the subprime bubble burst. And that's what I saw back in 2020 with the pandemic. And that's what I see happening right now. I mean, I'm seeing the whole economy just going into this slump, but I don't see anybody wanting to acknowledge it. And that's what I'm seeing right now. But nobody wants to admit that there's a problem. No, they're hoping that they can get the election over and get back in their seats and hope everybody gets duped into voting straight down a blue ticket, and they can go back to business as usual of not listening to we the people. But I think a lot of people are fed up at this point, and I think that they're fed up at this point. So these guys, if they're thinking that they can skate by on their gimmicks like they did before, but the whole thing is, I think that they know they're running out of cards and they've alienated voting blocks. But I just have to wait to see if these people have the backbone or the stones to either turn on these individuals by staying home or looking to pick their own candidates, because it's clear that these candidates aren't serving we the people. I mean, this is what's happening right now. We have an economy that's just completely not working at all, because again, how many economic booms have layoffs? And that's what many people have to think about our economy. How many economies that do well have layoffs? How many economies that do well have businesses closing? I mean, if you walk down the streets of New York, you see a lot of businesses with for rent signs and stores that are closed. How is that part of an economic boom? That's a critical question I gotta ask. I mean, I only saw this type of despair back in 1991 when we saw American factories close and be sent to China forever. And I'm seeing that happen once again after this pandemic. I mean, I have never seen the economy really recover at the shopping districts like 34th Street. I've never seen the shopping districts come back at all. And I've seen more and more businesses close, and I'm not really seeing businesses open to replace them. Because in a booming economy, you would see all of that real estate basically being bought up in large numbers. You would see people looking to open up retail, but you don't see that at all, nor do you see demand for merchandise, which I showed with the Hasbro Pulse website. Again, this Hasbro Pulse website, when it was out, again, you would see items basically selling out. You would see sold out everywhere as related to the pre-orders. That's what I've saw from about 2016 all the way up to about 2022. They would put up a pre-order and that figure would sell out. But these days I'm seeing figures basically sitting there for months on end. And these are figures like Pulse exclusives or Comic-Con exclusives, stuff that usually sells out easily, but this stuff is languishing on shelves. And when it languishes, it then is moved to Ollie's on clearance and Ross. And that, again, is an indicator of a market that's struggling. And it's struggling because people just don't have that money anymore. No, people don't have that money anymore. And that's what nobody wants to talk about during this election year, because to use the R word, again, that would be the end of the Blue Party if people start talking about an R word. But we are in that situation because we have a country that basically doesn't want to acknowledge the state of its union, the state of its economy. No, they want to talk about Ukraine. They want to talk about other countries. They want to talk about other countries' businesses, but they don't want to talk about America's economy and American people. No, they would rather consult an AI instead of a real person. And that's the sad part of America. The American government stopped serving we the people and is looking like it's serving itself. And that's the detached state of our union. And we're not really talking about our economy. And when I look at our economy, we are not in a place where we're doing well. No, we don't want to talk about that at all. No, what we want to do is say the economy is doing well. We have Joe Biden talking about, oh, we added 2 million jobs. Well, when I go out to apply for a job, I don't really get callbacks. I haven't gotten anybody to even call me for an interview. So if your economy is doing well, you would be out here looking to call people if there is a so-called shortage, like some say. I mean, if a guy comes to you and says, I want to apply for this job, you would want to go and talk to him, but you don't see that at all. No, I'm not seeing that at all. All I'm seeing is people lying about the economy, and Americans are now starting to see the economy as an issue because a lot of Americans are seeing that we are clearly in a state of a recession. That's what most Americans are seeing right now because you see less people. You see less people out here in the job market. You see them trying to do things to try to minimize people in the job market. So I'm not really seeing what they're talking about. And it's like these guys are living in their own world and they're not living in the world with the rest of us. So that's why when I was speculating about this recession, because I look at the state of New York and I can clearly see a city that is not in a booming place, even though you've got guys at the Cream of Wheat man saying everything is good. No, it's not good when you're seeing Pookie acting a fool on the train and you're going to business districts where stores are closing, where people are moving away. I mean, that's not an indicator to an economy that's doing well. No, if you can go to prime real estate in Manhattan, places like Midtown Manhattan, on Madison Avenue and Times Square and 42nd Street, this is some of the top real estate in the world. And there are no businesses really there. Just do the Google map and you'll see it. You'll see clothes stores everywhere. And you can also go to places like Lower Manhattan near Wall Street, and you can see businesses closing, but you have people who will tell you everything is fine. I mean, how is everything fine when you've got closed businesses everywhere? You've got people not on the street, but a lot of migrants and a lot of homeless individuals. How are things doing? Well, when everything is in chaos, but you've got people who say everything is okay. And that's the whole mindset of a dysfunctional individual, like a beta male, because beta males, because they want to keep their world smooth, refuse to acknowledge that there's a problem. Whereas a healthy man will sit there and say, hey, you got a problem. You got to fix the problem. You got to deal with this. This is not up to par. But you have the beta male who will just try to keep his world smooth because he's afraid of conflict. And what he'll do is bury the information, hide the information, stick his head in the sand and say everything is fine, but everything is not fine because, again, booming economies don't have people being laid off. Booming economies don't have businesses closing. Booming economies don't have people being put out of work. Booming economies are not filled with crime and homelessness. Booming economies are not having people in squatting in buildings. Booming economies don't have squalor, but you'll have people in the blue party tell you everything is great. And that's the same mindset that a drug addict has. Because what a drug addict will do is try to tell you everything is fine, but they're a complete wreck. They refuse to acknowledge the problem because they don't want to deal with the trauma that they're enduring. And because they don't want to deal with the trauma that's causing them to take drugs, they refuse to acknowledge that they have a problem until they hit rock bottom. And sadly, what's happening with this blue party and the Biden presidency is that they're taking America on a decline that sadly we will not hit rock bottom until Americans start taking a look in the mirror at themselves and seeing how far they have fallen. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. What's going on, T-Mac87? Glad to see you here. Ballet Dancer NJ, I'm glad to see you here. Valor, glad to see you here. Cuting Rourke, again, glad to see you here. Jazzy Indigo Blues and Z-Ken and Frank, F, you two, and everybody else, glad to see you here. And I'm glad to see everybody come out to tonight's stream. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight's stream. Now, I've had a really slow sales month for books, and I'm asking everybody to go out and pick up some of the books on the SJS Direct imprint by clicking the links in the description box. I'm asking everybody to pick up a copy of John Haynes' Illuminati on March 22nd and pick up the other books like John Haynes' Godbreaker at John Haynes at Death's Door, John Haynes' The Man with Nothing to Lose, John Haynes' Dark Succubus, John Haynes' Taking Care of Business, and many of the other books like those in the ISIS series and the Steam series, and pick up many of the other books like the Spinsterella trilogy. And I'm asking everybody to head over to Lulu to pick up a copy of the first John Haynes comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, and to have a lot of other great books on Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. So I'm asking everybody to pick up some of these books on Amazon and help me be able to take care of business and be able to pay my bills. And if you also want to help out in helping me be able to pay the bills that allow me to stay on the air, I'm asking everybody to, just drop a donation to the Cash App. That would be greatly appreciated because that'll help me stay on the air. And that's the wrong one. Oh, the next link is right. Okay, and head over there and drop a donation to the Cash App or drop a donation to the PayPal. That helps me to be able to stay on the air and be able to do more streams. And also, again, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their evening and their morning to be with me. And I hope you'll be there next week for next week's stream. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And I hope you'll be there next Friday for next week's stream. Everybody have a good evening and